I would like to ask everyone to please stand as we pledge the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, excellent. We're honored tonight to have as special guests. We've got, she hasn't arrived yet, but we have State Auditor Diana DiZoglio coming, speaking yes on question 1. And yes on question 2 is Shelley Scruggs. And we've got Edward Doobie and Alan Jalen. And for no on 2, we have Jill Norton. So, I was hoping that we'd be able to get right into question 1, but we don't have the yes people here, so hopefully they'll come and we'll get into that part of the program. So we'll keep moving on then. So let's get into the yes on 2. All right. So let's get some introductions in, and when the auditor comes, I'd like to jump into that because that'll be shorter and it'll give you guys more time of uninterrupted. So our guest tonight for yes on 2, we have Shelley Scruggs. Yay! She's a parent of a junior at Minuteman Regional Technical High School in Lexington. She's the lead petitioner on the first ballot initiative to propose dropping the MCAS graduation requirement. They joined forces with the Mass Teachers Association on what is now question 2. She's an electrical engineer who has worked for MIT Lincoln Laboratory for 31 years, and she resides in Lexington. Welcome, Shelley. And then we have Edward Doobie. He's a social studies teacher, team leader, and soccer coach at William Diamond Middle School in Lexington, and started teaching in his 40s after working in the corporate world, and he resides in Burlington. Welcome, Edward.
Thank you.
And then we have Alan Jalen. He's a board member of Citizens for Public Schools and a retired education writer. He's now editing a blog about the Boston Public Schools with an informal group of parents and teachers called Boston Parents Schoolyard News, and he resides in Somerville. Welcome. Thank you. And then, taking on the 3 of them, we have no on 2, we have Jill Norton. She's a parent and director of Clark Street Consulting. Jill and her husband are parents of 2 school-age boys, one of whom learns differently because of dyslexia and ADHD. She has spent over 25 years working to improve public education, beginning as an elementary and Montessori teacher, leading a nonprofit think tank focused on Massachusetts education policies and supporting educators through professional development. She has served as senior policy advisor to 3 Massachusetts Secretaries of Education, consulted to and advised state education agencies as Director of Education Policy at ADT Associates, and now consults to education nonprofits in Massachusetts and nationally through Clark Street Consulting, which she founded. Jill's lifelong passion is helping public education level the playing field for all kids. Welcome and thank you, Jill. Thank you. And so the way I'm thinking we can start here is I'd like to know how the ballot question came into being in the first place, what inspired it, and kind of tell us the personal story of that, and then we can converse and everyone can talk and we'll go from there.
Okay, well, I have a son, he's a junior at Minuteman, and he's also diagnosed with ADHD. He's still quite a handful, and he's never been a good test taker. He's always been in special ed, for reading and math and so forth. And so I've always been concerned, it's amazing how you go from 2 to 16 like that.
Yeah.
And so I've always been concerned about what's going to happen when he gets to the MCAS. And I was thinking about this when he started high school a couple of years ago at Minuteman. And so I decided, I was researching this, let me get a ballot question. So I got myself and about 10 or 11 other people from Minuteman parents, people from my church, and some other people. We got together and we wrote up the first ballot question. It's much longer than the one here. Essentially, it says it says essentially the same thing. We're just going to drop the MCAS graduation requirement, just the graduation requirement. Require kids to take the test at least twice, so they have incentive to get it right the first time. And I also added a little fun plug that it would retroactively any student who didn't get their diploma but got a certificate of attainment because they didn't pass the MCAS would get their diploma back. Because when I went to school, it was grades, it was grades, credits, and good attendance, and then that's when you went to high school. And so my concern was first, obviously for my son. I should also say that he took it last spring. He passed the science, he passed the math, he missed the English by just 1 point. 1 point. And 2 years ago, the Department of Secondary Education and Elementary Education actually raised the English by a couple of points. If they had left it where it was, he would have been done. So I credit people at Minuteman because they spent essentially the whole sophomore year making sure these kids had to pass the test. Because as a lot of kids go into vocational world, your high school diploma is your sheepskin. That is the most important. You have to have that. And what concerns me is that, we understand how this works in Massachusetts, where if you don't pass the MCAS, you have to get a certificate of attainment. But the problem is that if you go to another state, if you go to try to be you talk to an employer, why don't you have a diploma? And how do you explain that? And I just, as we discussed, I don't want to spend too much time on this, but that's my concern, making about the student. And another question is, how much are they getting out of the MCAS? How much is being turned into the MCAS?
May I ask a question? I get to hear you say students spend a lot of time the sophomore years to study for the MCAS.
At Minuteman, yeah.
What senior, junior, sophomore, do they take the MCAS?
They take it as sophomores.
As
Sophomores, and then if you don't miss it, if you don't pass one or more of the tests, you get multiple times to take it.
Junior and then
Yeah,
senior.
yeah. So I know, I've read stories of kids, of people who've gone through and they've taken it several times. And there's one guy I read in the newspaper or online where he missed the English he took it several times by 2 points or something, and he didn't get his diploma. And that is just, he's like 32 now, and that's been kind of sitting on him. Yeah, I mean, there's a very important emotional and confidence part of this. Looking at these people as students as people going into the working world without a diploma. You went to school every day. You went to school with your friends. You took all your tests. You passed all your classes. You didn't make it with this MCAS, and you don't get a diploma.
So you have the opportunity to take it as sophomore. If you fail, you have the
Take it
opportunity to take it
multiple
as
times.
junior. You only need to pass it once. Pass it as sophomore, you're guided through to senior,
Yeah.
you graduate.
Yeah, they give you multiple times. There are all kinds. I mean, they will grind you up as many times as you need to be ground. I should say that's the word. But sometimes you just don't get there. I know there's students. Heard a story about, just before we go on to a woman who studied cosmetology, and she got her certificate of attainment. For whatever reason, she didn't pass all 3 MCAS, and she went to apply for financial aid in order to go and to higher vocational school for cosmetology. She was denied financial aid because she didn't have a diploma. She was at school every single day doing what she did as when we all grew up, and she couldn't get that because she didn't have her diploma.
Would you say her grades were consistent with someone who should have graduated?
Yes, yeah, it had to be. In order to pass, in order to get those credits, you have to have a passing
But
score.
then she didn't pass the MCAS.
She didn't pass the MCAS. I mean, I know people who just, I know one woman I work with, I work at MIT. A lot of people are smart. She missed the science by 1 point. And they made her spend several weeks during the summer after high school going through this sort of remedial whatever to make up that 1 point.
Actually, the young woman, I think I know the young woman you're talking about. She couldn't pass the math test. She got her certificate of attainment, I think it is, right? She came back to high school, which was really embarrassing for her, the next year to take it again, and failed by 2 points. Then she came back a second time afterwards, and people are saying to her, "What are you doing here? We thought you were done," right? Passed by 2 points. Then she could get financial aid to become a hairdresser, which is what she wanted to be.
A question, of the total number of high school students, how many pass it on the first go-around? And then of the ones who don't pass, how many subsequently pass? I mean, I'm hearing anecdotal individual cases, but I'm trying to figure out how big of a problem this is. Is it 1% of all high school students, or is it 10%?
Well, I think, I mean, there's a couple of problems. I think the actual number as they go through, I think it's like a few hundred, 700 actually.
700,
Yeah,
yeah,
and
it varies from year to year.
It doesn't count, it doesn't talk about the people who just like actually fail out. The problem is that two things. From the teacher's perspective, it's how much time they spend just teaching to the test. How much time is devoted to that as opposed to actually teaching a subject.
Do we know the answer to that?
And
Do we
there's been a
know the
lot of-
answer how much time this teacher spends teaching to the MCAS versus teaching the subject?
The teaching to the test is, so the test tests standards that teachers are teaching anyway. So in a, and I would argue at Minuteman, which is where my son is too,
Oh.
this is happening, that teachers are teaching the standards that they are expected to be teaching at the grade level. The test assesses whether they are doing that or not. So in the, classrooms, I'm sure yours is this way, you're teaching what you would teach to the standards. What happens is at the end of the year, you're assessing how did we do and what did the students get from that. If you're teaching to the test, you can teach test taking tricks and drills and skills, but that isn't the intention of teaching to the test. Teaching to the should be just teaching the standards because the MCAS is evaluating the standards at the end of every subject, at the end of the grade levels and or subject exams.
If I get back to my question, so the
Can I
answer
answer-
was,
can I
out of
answer?
400
Yeah.
high school, around 700 students?
So it's an average of about 700 students a year who, just because of MCAS, don't receive their high school
In all of
diplomas.
Massachusetts.
In
Out of
all
how
of
many students?
Massachusetts,
Let
about
me
900.
let me interrupt here,
Okay.
because this is getting, we're getting pretty
Into the
into
weeds.
to the deep here.
Sorry.
So what I'd like to do is take just a preview of this, and I'd like to, the plan was to have question one come up first. You need to get out of here pretty quick, right? Is that,
Okay.
you're,
Thank you, though. I appreciate that. I very much enjoy hearing this robust discussion. We're talking about question one
so
for
let-
months and months and months now. It's nice to hear about something else.
So let's go to question one, and because like I say, this is I think we want to have a good flow on this, and so see my own train is derailed here, and so ultimately I couldn't get someone to come in to speak on question one on the no, so. Let me, as part of my introductions here, I actually want to offer an explanation, but I'm sure it'll be taken more as a rant. But sometimes something good does come from a rant, so let's put it out there. For reasons I think we can all agree on, politicians work for, quote, we the people, and as such, they owe everyone answers. They are not our leaders. They are our contracted agents. They are really group proxies, if you will. We do pay them to do our bidding. So starting back in August, I made multiple attempts via email and phone calls to find someone in the, quote, people's house to speak in opposition to question one. Thinking it best to start at the top of the food chain, I actually thought it would be good to keep it local, so I started in Framingham. And I began with State Senate Speaker Karen Spilka. I even managed to get correspondence with her scheduler, and I was promised that my invitation would be passed on, but I was ghosted when after a while I began asking, are we going to be able to count on Senator Spilka's participation? I definitely felt disrespected, but hey, at least now I know how she rolls. I was also trying to work on House Speaker Mariano out of Quincy. With him, I wasn't even ghosted. I was flat out ignored. Then on to our own senator, Jamie Eldridge, who again, after more than a few attempts to reach him, but to his credit, his office did finally get back to me, and within a sufficient time to say, oh sorry, the senator is busy that night. Well, okay. So I reached out to our state rep, Kate Hogan, and again, after speaking with someone in her office and several more tries to get a response, her office only just yesterday responded with, oh sorry, the rep is busy that night. If these people cared, they would have at a minimum responded in writing what their positions are and why. because they know this is why we're getting together. But I see it as their collective middle finger to us, and that should serve as a reminder that we don't need a term limit law, and that just like Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz, you have the power, you've always had the power, you just don't know it. And so they've gotten fat and happy, so where does that leave us? So me being me and a regular viewer of Keller at Large, I remembered that he had State Representative Garcia from Chelsea on his show speaking on the ballot questions. So while I do not actually have Representative Garcia here in person tonight, she showed her gratitude and respect for we the people in her appearance on the show. So please consider Representative Garcia as an unwitting pinch hitter for our elected officials tonight as no one won. And since her argument is actually pretty short and basic, I also have chiming in from Keller, Evan Horowitz. He is the Executive Director of the Center for State Policy Analysis at the Jonathan Tisch College of Civic Life at Tufts University. And so,
power to the state auditor to investigate the workings of the legislature. The legislature's getting kind of a bad rap recently, concerns about process, how tightly controlled it is. Do you think question one is a good idea or a bad idea?
Well, honestly, I believe that it's up to the voters to decide. However, you're asking me what do I think about it. And what I think about it is transparency shouldn't be the center issue. To me, what matters is effectiveness. Are we effective? Can we pass? Can we move the needle forward? And we're talking about Hispanic Heritage Month. What Latinos want to see is, are we making the pathways to access to education any easier? And I would say proudly, yes, we have. We just passed legislation that allows $117 million to go towards free tuition of community colleges. That's wonderful. I think that's being effective. That's what Latinos are looking for. Are we invested in healthcare? Absolutely. We just passed an amazing maternal health bill in informal session just a couple of weeks ago, thanks to the leadership of Representative and Chairwoman Marjorie Decker. So when we talk about transparency, I understand it. However, what matters to me as a policymaker and as a resident of this state is effectiveness.
Question one, the state auditor's authority to audit the legislature. A yes vote would allow the auditor to more broadly probe and evaluate a whole range of activities that the legislature engages in. Auditor DiZoglio says this would serve the public's interest in transparency. Opponents say she's overstepping her boundaries and there's really nothing fishy going on. What did you find?
But I doubt there's nothing fishy going on. But I don't think the ballot question resolves it. What we basically found is even a yes vote probably will not empower the auditor to oversee the things people care about in the legislature, their votes, their committee assignments. She's not going to have that authority. The courts probably won't give it to her, and the legislature will fight back. So I think a yes vote is not a vote for this power. A yes vote is a vote for gridlock.
It would send a message to the legislature, though.
It would, but if the legislature were sensitive to messages from the public, we probably would not be in this situation.
Great point.
And so with that,
Chuck, did you get the express written permission of the NFL to broadcast that?
shh. And so with that, let me give you an introduction for a person who does care about the people enough to come and speak. We have State Auditor and sponsor of question one, Diana DiZoglio. Diana DiZoglio serves as the 26th Auditor of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. She was sworn into her first term on January 18th, 2023. So just coming up on a year. A student of Massachusetts Public Schools, Auditor DiZoglio went to Middlesex Community College, earning a financial scholarship to Wellesley College. She then served in the state legislature as an aide, then as Chief of Staff for the Professional Firefighters of Massachusetts, and through the years of work in local nonprofits and community organizations, she won her first race in 2012, serving 3 terms as state representative. In 2018, she was elected as state senator, serving 2 terms. In her new role as auditor, DiZoglio is committed to increase transparency and accountability in state government and ensure no one, no matter their background, bank balance, or zip code, receives different treatment on Beacon Hill. Please join me in welcome Auditor Desoglia.
Well, thank you so very, very much for that gracious introduction, and I'm glad I was able to make it tonight after hearing the rest of your comments earlier, Chuck. I do want to say, truly thank you for the invitation. It is a little bit more rare that I, as a Democratic elected official, get invitations from my wonderful friends on the Republican side, and I am always very grateful for the opportunity. I think that we need to have more bipartisan conversations like this and get together and talk about how we can make progress for our communities. This is the way that things should be getting done, is by sitting together at the table to talk about things, to answer questions, and to work through issues that are really important to all of us. Our neighborhoods are certainly not partisan. So, you know, when we talk about these issues, many times we know they're not partisan issues, and I'm here to talk tonight about one of those issues that I think we can all agree on that is a non-partisan issue. A little bit of background on this issue: when I did campaign for the seat, I was very clear about my history as a legislator fighting for transparency, my distaste for the dysfunction of the state legislative process, and for the lack of transparency, accountability, and equity and accessibility in the legislature when it came to the treatment of various legislators and the communities that they represent, and was very vocal about the need to reform our legislative process. That was not taken too kindly by Democratic leadership in my own party, who very much fought back against the transparency and accountability initiatives that we would often file. Oftentimes I did find myself joining with my colleagues on the Republican side to vote for changes to our rules packages alongside of actually the progressives. So it was quite the mix when we were voting on these different issues. We would see the most conservative members voting with the most liberal members, all coming together because they believe in good government and that folks should not be able to get so much power centralized into the hands of just a few that they can run the system essentially at our own state house, the people's house, in a dictatorial fashion, like an authoritarian regime. We believe in having a democratic process where we can participate in that process, where if we have agreements or disagreements as Democrats, as Republicans, that we'll be able to talk about those things and actually voice our concerns with each other and make progress in that way. That's not happening at the State House right now. That's why you see so many folks really pushing for this increased transparency and accountability and crossing party lines to make any progress possible. You know, I have to agree with Evan that this will not change the culture on Beacon Hill and the State House entirely if we can audit the state legislature. But it is one additional thing that we can do to try to help to find out how our tax dollars are being spent, because right now we're being denied access to that information in full. We're only getting a screenshot, essentially, so to speak, of how legislative leaders want us to view their finances. We're not able to see things like state contracts and procurement processes and procedures. We are not able to see how those matters of business are being conducted behind those closed doors up on Beacon Hill. We are not getting any cooperation from House leaders or Senate leaders, much like Chuck. Please don't think it has to do with anything regarding your party affiliation, my friend. I am the youngest Democratic woman serving in constitutional office, and I can't get a response from my own party's leadership on Beacon Hill either. They refuse to respond to phone calls, emails, or even converse with me at the State House. So we're living in a time that is very concerning when it comes to our democracy as a whole. And I'm not talking about our democracy in terms of Democrat. I'm talking about our democracy in terms of our ability to be heard, to participate in a process that's supposed to be set up for we the people in a commonwealth that was established to support the common and good will of the people all the people, regardless of where we come from, regardless of what our background is or our bank balance, or what our religious or political beliefs are. And that is something that is under threat at the State House right now, because debate is limited, access to resources and information is limited, and that power really is centralized into the hands of a few. You know, we all heard in grade school, probably, knowledge is power. Do we remember that? Probably you saw it above the chalkboard before we had the electronic boards for everything. Up above the chalkboards growing up, knowledge is power. And knowledge is power, and right now, knowledge about what's happening with our tax dollars, knowledge about what's happening with important legislation, knowledge about budgetary issues, all of those things, that knowledge is being hoarded by just a few people in positions of power at the State House. And if knowledge is power and knowledge about that information is being hoarded amongst those people, what they're really hoarding is power. And they're not taking power away from the auditor's office when they hoard that knowledge and keep it all to themselves away from the people of Massachusetts. They are taking that knowledge and therefore that power away from the people. The people is who the Constitution is there to protect. We've heard a lot in this conversation about question 1 from those in opposition. Excuse me, I'm losing my voice. I've been talking for about 2 years on this issue, so it's finally getting to me. But what we've been hearing from the opposition is that, well, they believe that there's a separation of powers concern, and that the legislature, since they make their own rules, that they should also be able to, exempt themselves from all these different laws. They shouldn't have to participate in the system of checks and balances that exists in our state government, and that they should be able to reign supreme. That is essentially what people arguing this separation of powers concerns are trying to mislead us into believing right now. Friends, I need your help to get the word out there, but the separation of powers is being manipulated right now, and it is being weaponized against the people of the Commonwealth when it was actually set up to protect we the people. The separation of powers simply means that the powers of government were separated. That's all it means. It doesn't mean there's no system of checks and balances anymore. The separation of powers actually exists for the purposes of ensuring checks and balances exist. Without separating the powers of government, we would have a dictator. We know that other places in the world have dictators because they don't separate powers amongst the executive, the legislative, and the judicial. They allow one entity to wield all of that power, and then that power can be weaponized against the people in those areas. We here in the state of Massachusetts, thankfully, and in the United States, we have a separation of powers that separates the powers of the legislature from that of the judiciary. What does that mean? Okay? What that means is the legislature has the power. Their power is to what? It's to vote on legislation. It's to vote for the budget. That's a legislative power. The power of the judiciary is the power of the bench. We have judges that sit on the bench and they adjudicate matters in court. They're the judges. They're the justice system. That's their role and their power. And then we have the executive, we have the governor. The governor is able to, through her power, sign bills into law and sign executive orders. Those are the powers of the different branches of government, and thank God they're separate. Because what a world it would be if we had one entity, especially if it were legislative leaders right now, making the laws, voting on the laws, signing the bills into laws, and then deciding whether or not those bills meant whatever they meant in the justice system, also acting as the courts. Certainly we would not give all those powers to one entity. Those powers are separate for a reason.
But those
Which branch of government are you part of?
So, I am part of the executive branch of government, and my power in my office is only to audit, and just to audit, and really just to audit. We don't have any authority to adjudicate matters in court, to vote on bills in the state legislature, or to sign bills into law like the governor does. We only have the ability to audit. And I'm going to wrap this up because I see there are questions. I bring that up because the opposition will say that this violates the Constitution, that it is an exercising of the powers of the legislature, that we can't perform our powers because they think that they should be all powerful. We're not trying to exercise the powers of the legislature. No one from my office, when they audit the governor's office, goes in and then tries to sign a bill into law because they're doing an audit. Nobody, when we audit the courts, which we do, goes and sits themselves in a judge's seat and says, well, we're auditing you, now we get to be a judge and a jury. Certainly not. They go in, they do their audit, they give the report, they leave. Similarly, when we audit the legislature, as we have over 100 times in the past until the early 90s when they started originally opposing this, no auditors go in and try to sit there and exercise the powers of the legislature. They just seek to go in and to conduct an audit because that is the power of the auditor's office in the system of checks and balances established by our Constitution. I would add in as a final word here that the legislature audits the executive branch, that's a convenient thing that they keep leaving out every time they talk about how the executive shouldn't have audit authority over the legislature and that they need to audit themselves. They audit, they investigate, they provide oversight for executive branch agencies. They actually even have a post-audit and oversight committee that has subpoena authority over executive branch agencies. That fact is repeatedly left out in these bogus arguments that we will hear about why this can't occur or shouldn't occur, and the bogus informational ballot booklet that we got here, which very much allowed for, skewed information to be published in it. Those factors are conveniently left out, and it's unfortunate. So yes, I am here tonight to set the record straight, and I am here tonight happy to answer any and all questions because I believe in this proposal. I know that the law already allows for these audits to happen. We shouldn't even need the ballot question to pass this. But because legislative leaders are violating current law, and we've been blocked from accessing the court system, this is our only opportunity to get access to documents which, frankly, friends, should already be a matter of public record, but our legislature exempts themselves from the public records law as well. So this is all about access, it's about transparency, it's about accountability, and I will, of course, open it up for questions. Thank you so much.
I got a quick question.
Sure.
And you touched on it just in the final phrase of what you talked about. There is a public records law. If I, as a citizen of the state of Massachusetts, want to see a contract, a state contract, can I, as a matter of the public records law, go to the agency that signed that contract and say, may I see, as a citizen, may I see that contract?
No, you may not. And the reason why you may not when it comes to the legislature is because they've exempted themselves from having to let the taxpayers who fund those contracts from seeing those contracts and how they are executed. Now, other state entities like yours truly over here and the state entity that I am leading right now in the state auditor's office, we are indeed subject to the public records law. And if you call my office and you would like to see a document that is subject to public records, like a contract, a receipt for how we spent your money, I am required to show that to you. Just like our cities and towns are required to show that to you. Every municipality in the Commonwealth has to follow public records law and give you that information as a tax-paying resident. But the legislature exempts themselves from the same laws that they impose on
That's
others.
why I asked, because I've been involved from the municipality side, and we often cite the public records law and then get information from the schools or whomever wherever we, but you can't do that at the state level.
This audit would allow for public records to be made out of anything that we audit, because everything that we audit becomes a matter of public record. So if I audit it and I ask a question and then I get access to the receipts, that in turn gives you all access to the receipts. And that's what I think legislative leaders are afraid of.
I have a
Yes.
question. And I'm for this, but we have a 99% Democrat state house. So you audit and, you find that they're, spending, recklessly and stuff. What good would it do? I mean, that's the problem. What are you gonna do when you find that, say, Jamie Eldridge is mismanaging the money?
Well, I mean, I think it's important to say that Senator Eldridge has no access to any of the documents that I am trying to get access to. It's only the Speaker and Senate President, really, and their offices that have access. But what I will say is that I agree with you that it can be disenchanting and disheartening at times to know that folks up on Beacon Hill have had pretty much zero interest in changing the rules when it comes to giving folks more access to these types of documents that should be common sense documents to give the taxpayers we represent. I do want to point out, I think it's important to point out that this isn't due to the fact that Democrats are elected up on Beacon Hill. You have a Democrat sitting right in front of you, and I am sure on other issues we are going to disagree. When I go to my Christmas Eve party with my papu, my grandfather, he is a strong Trump supporter, and he likes to let me know what he thinks about me being a Democrat in Massachusetts. And he lets me know a lot louder as the evening goes on and his Greek wine starts flowing. I love my papu with all of my heart. I love my grandfather. And I welcome those conversations, and I'm okay with us disagreeing on policies. I don't think it's because we have Democrats on Beacon Hill. What I think it's because of is because Beacon Hill is no longer about being Democrat or Republican. It's about a few people who own all of the information and all of the power. You have some Democrats, some Republicans up there who really do want to do the right thing. And I know there are a lot of folks up there who are self-serving and are doing it for themselves and for what they can get out of it for themselves. But there are also a lot of good people on both sides. On both sides, I have a lot of friends up there who are Republicans, a lot of friends up there who are Democrats, and a lot of people who are Democrats who, when I'm around them, I check my drink and want to taste her around me. So I think it's less about the party, Claire, and I think it's more about this issue of power and this issue of trying to hold on to that power. It's that age-old adage of absolute power corrupts. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. And we are no longer able to, on Beacon Hill, have those healthy disagreements. I have a great time, sparring with my papu on Christmas Eve. A great time, and he loves getting to get his points in there and throw those punches. We don't get to do that on Beacon Hill. It is discouraged. It is retaliated against if you share your opinion on the Senate floor or the House floor, whether you're a Democrat sharing your opinion or whether you're a Republican sharing your opinion. We have folks here tonight from, I know both sides of the SN2 campaign, but I'm going to use the SN2 campaign for the purposes of the Democratic issue, who are, I would say mostly Democrats that are voting on some of these issues. And I would say Democratic leaders had no interest in allowing this issue to be debated, regardless of however many co-sponsors were there supporting it. So I think the issue here really is, because this issue is nonpartisan. So many issues are partisan. This is not one of those issues. This issue is about good government. And I know the Democratic leaders could very well fight against it if we pass this. But the reality is that we have to keep fighting. We can't just give up and just roll over. I know everybody here tonight understands that we do have to keep fighting for what we believe in, otherwise you wouldn't be here tonight. So we have no guarantees, but it's worth campaigning, it's worth putting in the effort, and then, we'll have to continue the fight after November 5th.
I have a quick question. I'd like it if you could get us into the mindset of House leadership, because they know everything that you've said. We know everything you've said. There's nothing new under the sun there. And so what I get out of this is that they don't care that we think. I mean, it's clear to me, and I think you would probably have the same sense, that this question is going to pass overwhelmingly. I helped collect signatures for it, and I had no problems. And I had people who know me as a Republican and, you know, let me know that they didn't like me. But they signed that. They signed that ballot petition.
You know what, Chuck, to your
You know?
point, a lot of people who don't like me are voting for this initiative.
Right.
And they're happy to let me
So
know.
what's the-
And I say, I don't understand. What's there not to like? I
So
mean,
what's
come
the
on,
strategy of the, because they know, are they banking on that we're just gonna roll over? Is that it?
So I believe what the strategy is, a lot of folks think this is going to end up in court.
Uh-huh,
It could.
okay.
I'd be surprised if it did. Because if they knew that they had a leg to stand on with their, misleading constitutional claim, they would have already taken me to court on this issue. They would have already gone to court with me. I've been asking to go to court for the last year and a half, and I've been blocked access to the judicial system because they know they don't have a leg to stand on. Could we get a judge who happens to know some legislative leaders and then side with them? Sure, that would really stink. But do most people on Beacon Hill actually know this is not a constitutional issue? 1,000%. We have over 100 audits that our office has conducted. Our statute right now says all departments, all accounts, all activities of the Commonwealth are subject to an audit of the state auditor's office. That has meant the courts and the executive branch, and up until Speaker Flaherty took office in 1991 when he pushed back against former auditor Joe DiNucci, up until that point, preceding a period of scandal and corruption and 3 indictments, up until that point, audits always occurred on a regular basis. That's when those audits stopped happening.
But you're not answering why.
And what
the optics.
legislative leaders are
Yeah.
banking on is their ability to quietly go in and overturn the law after we pass it. But we are not going to allow that to happen in the quiet of night, because of course, we're going to be calling on Governor Healy, if that happens, to veto that move and to require that our legislators go back and let them try to get that 2/3 majority to override that veto. I don't think that legislators are going to want to be on the record overturning the will of the people and their communities. This is going to pass if what my heart is telling me is true right now, and I didn't feel this way when I was running and I was on the ballot, this is going to win in every single community. I
Yep.
don't know what by margin,
Right.
but I know that this is going to win in every single community. I'd be shocked if it didn't.
Well, you heard Garcia. She said this isn't about transparency. We need to focus on the good job that we're doing.
I'll tell you something. You know what? I hear Representative Garcia's point on effectiveness, and while there have been some good things accomplished, and I'm happy that she highlighted some of those good things, we were just rated as the least effective legislature in the nation. So when she did point to the fact that it's about effectiveness, that's one point I agree with. And when we say we care about effectiveness, we need to look at the fact that we were just rated as the least effective.
I own my own business, and if an employee says to me, hey, look, I got the job, don't question me on how I did it, I'm sorry, we got a problem.
Now,
I
another,
agree with you. I agree with you.
the other thing I wanna know is, I mean, those of us, you know, we all know who Maura Healey is. Is she gonna, not veto the legislature and saying, nope, you can't audit us? I don't think so.
I can't speak for the governor,
No.
obviously.
And a
However,
crystal
what I
ball.
would say,
Right,
Is
you're asking me
that-
to have a crystal ball.
I'm being transparent, that I would certainly be calling on the governor to veto it if they did try to pull a stunt, like trying to overturn this law.
Because you say, there's good Democrats and good Republicans and bad Democrats and bad Republicans. But we all know what happens in the federal government, let alone the state. The bad Democrats and Republicans will say, if you go against us, forget about getting on any of the good committees, forget about doing this, forget about doing that. And they how should I put it, stronghold them into doing what they want.
I often call the legislature a hostage situation for a lot of these reps and senators, because even the Republicans have a hard time going against leadership these days. I've seen it. You know, they want to get up and say something, but then they get afraid to say something because they know that if they say something, even as a Republican, they're 1,000% going to get retaliated against and lose the funding that they got from the local senior center or something like that, right? And it is a tough place up there. I guess
It sounds like they play petty.
yeah, it's like a middle school playground, to be honest with you. If we're being really just candid here, right? And you know, I say this publicly
It's
quite
the
often.
truth. Mama said, tell the truth, baby.
You know, look, in every field, there's good, there's bad. You know, there's mediocre. There's all the things, right? We can like certain things about people and dislike other things about people. We can work together on some issues with each other, and then be on the opposite side of those issues, and still work together for a common good. You know, I think that, you know, I had, you know, former Senator Steve Bedore in my area when I was, before running for office was even a glimmer in my eye. And he said, you know, he was known for being a conservative Democrat, and you know, they called him, I think, the fifth Republican in there because he voted with the Republicans so often, but he had a D next to his name, and he was very proud of that. And he said, you know, listen, he said, it's okay to disagree, but we don't need to be disagreeable.
Right.
And I think that, you know, that's something in government right now that we can think about, where, you know, we're able to disagree about things and then agree on other things, and not be bad and not be good, but just have disagreements from time to time. I think that you're right about the point that, you know, leadership does control pretty much everything on Beacon Hill, and that's what I want to stay focused on, because that's the issue up there. And we're trying to get access to some of those documents, processes, and procedures and contracts that they're controlling right now, to disempower those who have too much power and give it to the people of Massachusetts. The Speaker and Senate President have said, well, the auditors just, you know, this is about power, this is a power grab, this is a power grab. Let me tell you something. It is a power grab, but not for me. It's a power grab for the people of Massachusetts.
Right.
I don't get any power out of this. Anything I look at is a matter of public record. If I get the document from them, that document is now yours.
Right.
It doesn't do anything for me to get access to a state contract and then keep it in my office, and that makes us powerful somehow. No, that's really just dumb. That's a dumb argument. When we get access to that information, the power is in the fact that now the voters have access. It is empowering to voters to have access to information. It is a tool to be able to make change.
Paul? Paul's been waiting.
Okay. Thank you. First of all, thank you for coming.
Thank you.
We appreciate you coming out to Hudson, or as I like to call it, the rebellious province of Hudson. Madam Auditor, you are a member of the executive branch. You know, you're asking us to give you oversight over a separate equal branch, and I think you kind of gloss that over and pretend like it's not an issue. Let me ask a question. You served, what, 12 years in the legislature, 10 years in the legislature?
10 years.
Does the legislature have the absolute power over the purse?
No, the executive branch, namely the governor, gets to actually put out her budget as well.
Okay, so the legislature passed a budget that said that the auditors, but that your salary is $185,000. Okay, that's the budget of the state auditor, $185,000. Go audit. Would that be them exercising oversight over you?
Exercising oversight?
Yeah.
No, exercising
They think you've gone a little beyond. They feel that you've gone beyond your purview. They can pull you back through money.
Would you like me to answer? I just want to make sure you're finished.
No, go ahead.
Okay, great. So that is them exercising their power to vote on the budget. and to set the budget, which is their power. That is not oversight power. What their oversight power is that post-audit and oversight committee and the oversight committees that they host. And I will say, in a respectful disagreement, without being disagreeable with you, my good friend Paul, I think I spent enough time talking about the constitutional issues. I actually had our good friend Bob here talking about how I was going on and on, so I thought I'd cut it short a little bit.
In that case, let me ask you a question.
For you, because I know I can talk a lot. But if you would like me to get more in to the constitutional issues, I am very happy to.
Well,
I want to make sure your questions are answered.
We can circle back to that. Clifton Larson and Allen is a consulting firm that does audits for towns, cities, and I'm looking at their Commonwealth of Massachusetts Annual Comprehensive Financial Report, 258 pages, includes the legislature. That's an independent audit of the legislature, not by a member of the executive branch. What would this ballot question bring that doesn't?
Did you just say 258 pages?
That's what the PDF says.
Yeah, it's actually a 6-page-ish report that was actually released to the public. That's the only thing that was released to the public of the audit of the state legislature.
Well, I'm looking at the state comptroller's website.
Yep, state comptroller actually does keep financial information, but doesn't keep the receipts. The receipts are audited by my office. So when we go into the University of Massachusetts, for example, we all get to post to, is that where you work?
No, the UMass Jersey though.
Oh, yeah. So when we go into the University of Massachusetts, and I love it, go UMass, we get to actually audit their claimed expenditures. So what you're seeing on the comptroller's website is what is claimed to have been expended. That is not something that has been verified. My office is the office that verifies the information that is on the websites, like the comptroller's office, so you can see a lot of numbers and you can see what folks claim they spent it on and how that's been documented. We go in and we say, okay, great, thank you so much for that information all being posted online. We'd like to see the receipts now to verify that what you claimed is actually accurate. We just did it for UMass Lowell. We just did it for UMass Dartmouth. They have a credit card that they use at UMass, and they're able to spend that credit card in a discretionary fashion. So we go in and we say, you've been using this credit card. We want to make sure everything was being done lawfully and in accordance with UMass's regulations. And if we find that it hasn't, we report on that to UMass and we require that they update their documentation and fix the issue. We are not able to do that in the legislature because that partial information that is up there does not have those receipts. Those receipts are being hidden right now by legislative leaders who, again, audit the executive branch, but yet claim that they should be exempt from the executive branch auditing them back.
And so this person on the TV that said, even if everyone votes yes on this, there is certain information you won't be able to get from them. Is that true, or was he lying?
So, I appreciate the pontifications of all of the professors who have really wanted to weigh in on this. I really do. I think it's great that professors are theorizing. That's what professors do, right? And good for professors who want to theorize about what they think the law will do or won't do in a future event. I think it's important to know that these are theories about what may or may not happen. These are predictions about what may or may not happen, and people are talking about what their viewpoints are based on what they've been able to find and what they think is going to happen. It's why Evan was on the screen saying, well, my theory is, essentially that this is going to happen, and then we're going to see gridlock. That's his prediction. Other predictions are, this is going to happen, then it's going to go to court. Another prediction is, this is going to happen, and then legislative leaders are going to try to overturn it. And then, those of us who are really trying to just put positive vibes out into the universe right now and hope for the best are saying, this is going to pass, the pressure is going to be on, and legislative leaders are going to have to eventually, at some point, comply with at least a portion of what we are trying to do. And even if it's minimal progress in comparison to what voters deserve, at least we will have made some progress.
What they're worried about is that the
Right.
voters will find out and they'll start voting differently.
Nothing wrong with that.
Tom?
I think that's one of many things that they're
Tom,
worried
Tom's
about.
up next.
Yeah.
I have a
Yes,
question for you.
Wait,
I-
Tom, wait, Bob, Tom, Tom
Okay,
has been
so
waiting.
basically your point is clarity, you know, so you can see everything that's going on. Let's say some contracts require multiple bids. Any department, do your office go in there and check to make sure that that requirement is met and it's not given to a relative?
So the answer about us auditing state contracts is yes. We do get to audit state contracts and make sure that there's no funny business going on, that they're not going out in a no-bid fashion or violating the law in any way, shape, or form. Now, we're resourced only to do that minimally because, you know, we've been a bit retaliated against in our budget as of late from folks who do have the power to set our budget. However, we do, with the limited resources that we do have, we do audits that include examinations of state contracting. I will give you one example briefly. The state's Convention Center Authority in Boston, the Massachusetts Convention Center Authority, they were alleged to have been violating ethics law, violating public records law, and also giving out no-bid contracts. When we went in and conducted our audit, we looked at some of those things. We ended up finding that no-bid contracts were indeed given out. Now, the allegation was that it was from a friend to a friend. We're not the State Ethics Commission, so when we got that allegation, we referred that to the State Ethics Commission for them to investigate. However, what we did cite them for was the fact that they did go around the bidding process. They did not have a public bidding process when they were supposed to. And they did give out hundreds of thousands of taxpayer dollars in a no-bid contract to a media firm unlawfully. They also executed, have you ever heard of non-disclosure agreements?
Yeah.
Okay, so we know non-disclosure agreements are used in the private sector and that they can be used to cover up all sorts of bad behaviors. But a lot of folks aren't aware that our state government actually uses non-disclosure agreements too, but they don't use their own money to pay for the silencing of victims to protect themselves from public scrutiny. They use our tax dollars to protect themselves from public scrutiny. So we actually found in the Convention Center Authority that a $1.2 million unlawful non-disclosure agreement was executed to conceal allegations of discrimination and retaliation. Unacceptable, unlawful behavior using our tax dollars. We can't see that information in the state legislature right now. They refuse to give us access to information about non-disclosure agreements. Now, we learned years ago that 33 non-disclosure agreements exist in the House of Representatives alone. We don't know how much they were for. We don't know why they were handed out. We don't have any information about them. It's unacceptable. State contracts, this audit that was done by the audit firm chosen by leaders who selected what those audit topics would be, that contract out with that auditor, if it even exists, we're being refused access to seeing that contract. We are unable to see how legislative leaders even selected their privately contracted auditor to examine their books. So we don't even know if that was done in a way that could be considered independent and in accordance with their rules, never mind the law. So that's very important.
Thank you very much. And,
Thank you.
I was a yes coming in here, now a definite yes.
Thank you.
Bob?
Yes, thank you, Diana.
Thank you.
First of all, I voted yes, I checked yes, and I clearly want to go yes, but I have concerns. First of all, you claim to be, you are the auditor of the state, right?
Yes.
A singular, you're the top of the heap of the auditor chain.
So I am the elected auditor of the Commonwealth, and I have many auditors that work in the office that I lead.
That was my next question,
Yeah.
follow-up question to that. How many auditors do you now have?
So,
How big
well,
is the staff?
so I want to say 150, 60, 70 right now. I need to go back and check exactly the amount, but
You answered.
the whole office is about 200 people.
Okay, my concern is tax and spend, tax and spend, tax and spend. We
Yeah.
already pay enough taxes. Government is national and local and state top-headed. We just have too much government going on. And if you get this passed, would your projection be that, I think you said 200, roughly 200 staff? Would it stay at 200? Would it go to 210? Would it go to 300?
You know, I think honestly that that remains yet to be seen. And
What is your projection?
So, you know, if history repeats itself, they are very likely to try not to retaliate too much. You know, they didn't defund my office this year because I was very public to watch them for retaliating against my office in the budget, because they would not be punishing me. They would be punishing the people of the Commonwealth, because we
So you're
save
going to
taxpayer money.
project for a larger staff to do all the...
So I've been asking for years, and so did my predecessor and the predecessor before her, ask for additional funding. Even my Republican opponent in the general election during the 2022 election cycle was advocating for a significant amount of increased funding for the office, saying that, you know, the office had never been able to meet its mandate because we are understaffed and under-resourced, and we save money for the Commonwealth. So you need to be able to go out, find the waste, fraud, and abuse, root it out, and then help to fix the issue.
I got it. Thanks for that.
But we are getting minimal increases. For example, Attorney General Campbell, I believe, got around 9.5%. Secretary of State got about 10%. Inspector General got about 10%. Our office got 2%. So when you compare it, across the board, that lack of equity is very clear in terms of the fact that similarly situated constitutional officers and beyond were getting right around the same range, and we were way down here, but they did make it just so that I wasn't able to go out and say they slashed my budget, right? Because that would be very clear retaliation. So they retaliate in a cute enough way to kind of try to get away with saying, well, we did give an increase. They just give you an increase that's so low that it doesn't keep up with the cost of living adjustments that occur. That's how they wrap the rope around your neck.
If the public sector runs like the private sector, it'd be a zero-sum game, meaning it would allow you, if it passes, to have more staff to do the audits. You would have to take money from somebody else. If not, then the taxes go up.
Right.
I don't think you have to rob here to pay Paul.
I totally get where you're coming from, and I think she made an excellent explanation. And so I want to build on what you just said. Are you planning to run again, or are they going to primary you?
I haven't thought a day beyond November 5th. And I'm not kidding. Everyone's like, where are you going after this long campaign you've been running? I'm like, I have no idea. But I'm really just, kind of focusing on the fact that I will get to put on my sweatshirt and sweatpants and stay in my home and drink a bunch of tea for at least a little while.
Are you running for re-election now?
No, I am not. I am not doing anything right now besides trying to pass this ballot question.
Not on November 5th.
No, I'm not on the ballot.
Yeah.
I'm not on the ballot potentially for another couple of years here. So we're getting through.
Because that's how the game is played, where if you don't play ball, they primary you, and that's the way it is.
What is your term?
That's part of democracy, I mean, let's go. It is what it is.
When does your elected term end?
It would be in 2026.
No, that's fine.
Yeah.
All right, well, we gotta kind of button up here, but
Sure.
Thanks again.
you came late. I'd like it if you'd fill out our before ballot. I know how you're gonna vote on one of them, but you can surprise us on the other. And your assistants, I'd love it if they filled it out too. And then if you leave now, you can fill out the afterwards anyways. But if you're willing to hang, we'd love to have you. We got food I'd love you to take and enjoy.
As much as I love my other question people over here and value all of you so much, I am really losing my voice, and I am talking all weekend and all next week. So I am going to head home if that's okay with everybody. But I thank you for sitting here through all of the questions. Bless you all. Bless you all, and have a great night. Thank you so much, everybody.
All right. We kind of started, and we're gonna kind of, let's pick up again where we left off.
Well, I
I
think
want
you
you to
lost one
recap.
Okay, so out of 400 high schools,
Now,
I knew there was.
700.
Thank
Oh,
you.
no,
Good night, Tom.
sorry.
Thank you.
It was a different, I just want to make sure I answered the question, and then I want to let these folks finish. You asked how many
so
students a year
700
are affected.
are affected, and out of how many students total?
Just under 1 million, 980,000 students.
So wait, so 700 students out of almost 1 million students
Correct, it's about
are affected by
1%.
this, and we're doing a ballot question about it?
It's about 1%.
It's more than just who doesn't
Yeah.
pass and doesn't get a diploma. It's the time spent on taking the test, not only at the high school level, but kind of all the way through fourth, fifth, eighth, and so on.
Third through eight.
But didn't we all study to take tests in school?
And they still take tests.
The MCAS strikes me as kind of the cornerstone of the 1993 Education Reform Act, and I say that as someone who graduated with the class of '94, so I escaped. But it kind of strikes me as a solution in search of a problem.
So, the purpose of that law was to improve education.
Has it?
True?
Now, let me just pass up.
So, yeah. So I think the first question after
Just to take
more than 20 years, right, ought to be, has it improved education? Because we're putting a lot of effort into this, a lot of time. By the way, I just so happened coincidentally, were you the one who asked how many people pass the first time?
Yeah, I was asking, like, who passed the first time, how many the second time, yeah.
So there's 3 tests, right? Statewide, for the English test, 11% don't pass statewide, but among English learners, it's about 2/3 don't pass. And 1/3 don't pass the math test, and 2/3 don't pass the science test. So for some groups of kids, it's a very big deal. For other groups of kids, it's not so. But I really want to deal with this other thing, which I have not heard so much about. Has it improved education? Okay? So, I don't know whether people have heard of the National Assessment of Educational Progress,
Yes.
right? So it's a national test. There are no stakes involved. It's not given to every kid. It's given to samples of kids. So there's no score for a school. So nobody has an incentive to teach to the national assessment. It's been going on since 1969. But state results, because they didn't test that many people, so they had national results. But state results go back late 1900s. So these charts, and I have a bigger version, you would think that if this innovation, a state test for getting a diploma, was useful, then you would see the scores go up for Massachusetts, right? So this is what the scores look like for reading.
That's the back of the first page.
Yeah. And
Flat.
it's flat.
They're all flat.
If you look at math, you see a sort of bump, went up a little bit the first few years, and then it leveled off and started to fall.
I apologize, I don't mean to interrupt you, but
Yeah.
it strikes me that the Education Reform Act was 1993, came into effect 1995-ish. You're
Yes.
kind of, I'm not really shocked to see that. What were the comparisons to 1990?
Right, so we're talking about the graduation requirement. So does everybody understand that MCAS is not going away regardless? Like, this is not about ending MCAS because that's a federal requirement. Everybody clear on that? Like, we all agree on that?
No.
Both sides agree.
No, they're going to
No, the MCAS test remains. It always remains. They'll still be taking it as they have. It's just that the requirement that they pass those 3 tests in order to get a diploma.
In order to get a diploma.
It's a diploma part. it's denying a student a diploma if they don't pass.
Yeah.
They don't remember how many times.
Every
That-
state has a state
Then what's the
test.
point of taking the test?
Sorry?
Then what's the point of taking the
Well,
test?
so in grade 3, for example, 3rd grade, right? 5th grade, 8th grade, actually 3 through 8, kids take the test, right? And there's no consequence for the kid. It's used to see how the school is doing, how the kid is doing, the parents get the results, right? I was in a debate with our colleague over there, and she was explaining how useful those lower grade MCAS results were for her, right? There were no consequences for the kid. Only the 10th grade test has consequences for the kid. Only the 10th grade test, if you don't get a high enough score, you have to take it again and again and again. Okay? So it's the again and again and again that will go away if this passes. So let me just finish it up, okay? So, on math, we are pretty much back to where we started. On reading, we never went anyplace. Now, another thing that people often say is, we used to be graduating lots of kids who were functionally illiterate. And this, we don't want to go back to those bad old days. Okay. So functionally illiterate it's a little bit hard to say what it really means. But there's no question that there are a lot of kids who do not read well enough and do not read as well as they should and don't do math as well as they should. No question about that. Let's see if this test, the graduation requirement took effect in 2003. Mm-hmm. That's right. And actually, you can't go back farther because the state results don't go back in the same form. Okay. So if you look at the bottom, the NAEP reports are really useful. Let me see if I got it. Yeah. They report how many kids are at, what are the scores at the 10th percentile. So these are kids that 90% of the kids do better than them, right?
The last page.
Right.
Yep.
So those are the kids who, if anybody, is going to benefit from this, lifting up the bottom. They would be the kids who we would hope would benefit. I think everybody hoped that they would benefit. And the fact is, they didn't. Right? So the scores did not go up for those kids. Now, on your forms, you also have all the subgroups. Black kids, Latinx kids, low-income kids.
Kids with disabilities.
So kids with disability. You don't have, and so I printed out separately, the 10th percentile of kids with disability, right? So this is the reading, and this is the math. So even the bottom 10th percentile for kids with disabilities have not gone up. So that doesn't mean that no kid has benefited. I'm sure that there are kids who have benefited. I think we've heard the story of one of them, or we will hear the story of one of them here. But since the average did not go up, and even the 10th percentile didn't go up, that means that somebody did worse while somebody else did better. So this has had no positive effect. So then you want to look at, does it have other effects? And I think it does a lot of harm. So I called a teacher at Hudson High School. He's a history teacher. Whitney Nielsen, whom I didn't know, I should say. He's the president of the local union. That's how I was able to reach him. If you know other teachers, you should by all means go ask them. The overwhelming majority, I don't know about Hudson, but the overwhelming majority of teachers, not only union activists in Massachusetts, support this proposal because they feel that it distracts them from teaching kids what they need to know. Now here's what he had to say though. First of all, so he doesn't like the test itself takes a lot of time, and they wind up having, like last year, they lost 6 half days. So kids didn't go to school for half a day 6 times. so that they could administer the test. But that won't really change because we're still going to have the test. What won't happen, though, is that kids won't have to take it over again. So he says, first of all, when a kid flunks the test, and some of these kids are, among the English learners, right? So they haven't learned English well enough. That's why they're not scoring well on an English test. And it's also why they're not scoring well on a science test, because the test is in English, right? But they're going to learn English. Meanwhile, you have flunked. You are a failure. You got to come back and do this over again. He says if it was just, like in the 8th grade, you don't do well on the test, oh, you feel bad, you pick yourself up, and you go back to class, and you get back at it. But here you got to, keep doing it. And it means that there are things that they could be learning, like technology classes, or like public speaking.
Or script, writing.
Or writing, composition, right? I mean, how many of us use public speaking, or speaking, at work, right? But that's not on the test. So that's not going to be focused on. And if there's a course on how to express yourself fluently, that kid can't take that course because the kid is busy focused on the test. Now, an interesting thing is that MCAS scores did go up. MCAS scores went up because that's what they teach to. So in a way, the difference between the national scores and the state tests is a measure, right, of how much teachers are getting distracted from really teaching the subject to focusing on this particular test, the kinds of questions you'll find on MCAS and you won't find on another standardized test that covers the same subject.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Because I'm 74, so I went to school
I'm even
way
older.
in the dark
I'm
ages.
79,
Is the
which I
MCAS,
can't believe myself.
is the MCAS timed?
No.
Okay.
So, simple question, kind of simple answer, it's not timed. Sort of complication is there's pressure on kids to finish. But fundamentally, if they want to, they can keep going. But there's pressure on them. This is a whole class of kids. They might say, well, you can't go to lunch until we go, or all the kids who haven't finished have to get into the same room. I'm told that there is pressure on them, but fundamentally it's not timed.
Okay, because that was because I grew up in the era when they didn't know about learning disabilities.
Yeah.
And I grew up as a dyslexic, not ADHD, just ADD kid.
Yeah.
And when they used to do the IQ tests and all that, I would fail miserably. And it's because I was distracted. And by the time they said 5 minutes left, I had a lot left, so I would just start filling them in. So that's why I asked, because a lot of kids don't do well if a test is timed.
Yeah.
But then you get accommodations. Like my son gets accommodations. He gets extra time. He also gets it in a room by himself, so that he doesn't have, because he's Mr. Social.
I would have done very well if I had accommodations back then.
You're not gonna like me at all. You're not gonna like me at all.
I find it hard to believe.
I love talking to people I disagree with.
I spent 30 plus years, unfortunately, or fortunately actually, in industry. I did a ton of hiring and firing. I had, if you don't mind me saying so myself, I had some pretty significant responsibilities, both to my company and actually to the government, our industry, but that's another story. So when I hired somebody, they came to me and they said, I have a high school diploma. Here it is. I passed, I went to school, I got a diploma from my high school. I associated with that were a set of expectations. That I'm sitting at a desk now, and I'm looking and I'm saying, okay, there's a set of expectations. This kid can read, he can write, he knows basic algebra, he can take ratios, he can spell or knows how to use spell check, he's written papers, you know, and had him critiqued, and he's taken the MCAS and passed it. If they're a student at the university, in Massachusetts, that's a fact. Wrong. Set of expectations out the window. Out the window. I could care less with regard to the scores on MCAS tests. Could care less. What I do care about is those kids that come to me saying, here's my college diploma, high school diploma. College too, also, by the way, another story. But here's my high school diploma. I care a lot that they be able to perform duties that I give them commensurate with what I expect a high school graduate would be able to do. I give them an instruction, take this from here to here and do this to this to this to it. Do you understand? Yes. And all of a sudden I find out they don't understand English. You know, what? You know, so my position is exactly the opposite of yours. I think that test should be made more rigorous so that when I hired somebody, I have the comfort of knowing that they have a certain set of skills that I can depend on that they have. And if there are anecdotal stories you could tell from here to when the cows come home, but the fact, you know, life isn't fair. And what happens to those kids who don't have high school diploma, if they work for me, they get fired. They get fired. I don't have the time, or I'm not skilled enough to make up their poor education. That's got to happen somewhere else. I don't care if they have dyslexia. I don't care if they have ADD. I don't care if they have ADHD. None of that matters. What matters to me is if they come to me and they want a job and I hire them, they can do what they're supposed to do. Now that sounds cruel, maybe, but that's life. You know, I work for a company that provides services and actually equipment for the government.
I think this would be a good time. We'd like to hear from
I
Jill.
hate to tell you what would happen if we weren't able to do it to the government's satisfaction.
You raised some great points, and I think I'd
So
like to hear how
there,
Jill.
I'm sorry.
How Jill
I
reacts to
unloaded.
that.
I'll be quiet the rest of the night.
No, you did great. You did great. Look, I'd like to hear.
Yeah, I think I have some responses to both things. So I would say that, so I think probably it's helpful to hear my son's story, so I will tell it quickly, because that's the reason, that's what motivated me to be a no vote, because I share so much in common with you all, as a former teacher, as a mom of a kid who learns differently. What happened for us was that he was passed all the way through up to middle school, and he was functionally illiterate. He's dyslexic, and teachers loved him and he loved them, and no one did anything intentional to him, but he could not read by the time he was in middle school. We had no data to look at until we got his third grade MCAS scores, which showed that he was in the partially meeting grade level expectations, low, like would not pass MCAS now. That was the first piece of objective data that we had. His teachers had all along been saying, we don't have data to share with you. He is below grade level, but he's making his own progress. We had no way of knowing how far below grade level are we until we saw third grade MCAS scores. He was not held. He was passed to fourth. So there was actually harm in him not getting what he needed and getting passed, because at every passing to the next grade, where his skills were here and his classmates were here, he felt more and more terrible about himself, and he retreated and decided he was not smart. He called himself the dumbest kid in the class. School was not for him, and he's being pushed through to the next. So it is the very reason that I'm no on two, because it's very easy for me to imagine him, a kid like him, getting all the way through high school, getting a diploma, still being functionally illiterate, not having the skills that he needs to be independent after high school. He'll pick up a trade. He's excited about what he's learning at Minuteman, and he he will need a certain level of skills, and as you're saying, he'll need to be able to do certain things. He knows that, we know that, in order for him to progress beyond an entry-level position in whatever trade he decides to pursue. So that's what I would say on that. On the data piece, I just want people to know, it doesn't refute your numbers at all. I just want people to know that there's another way to think about whether MCAS is effective. And I would point people, and I'm happy to share with you, Chuck, before there was a ballot initiative, researchers at the Annenberg Institute at Brown University were asked by the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education to look at MCAS over time. Like, so what difference does this make over time? And so they did a longitudinal analysis of MCAS scores, and they did find, and I have the slide up, but I'm happy to share, so it's a public document, it was shared at a meeting in 2022, that students from similar democratic backgrounds in the same high school were, if they had a higher MCAS score, it did track to higher earnings. So this, like, if you wonder, does the test score matter at all in life? This is one way of saying it seems to track with, whether it's causal or correlation, or it does seem over years of data to track. Higher scores do track with higher earnings. So it is making some impact over time. So I know folks probably have thoughts.
Well, I would disagree with that a little bit, because I mean, even without the MCAS, like the SAT.
Can you speak up a little bit?
Oh, I'm sorry. I would think, obviously on the top, kids who are not worried about passing the MCAS are going to do fine. I mean, they think they're doing fine. The SATs, it's fine. What we're talking about, and this is as an African American parent, I actually sat in a group like this for the Cambridge Public Schools, where a lot of black parents were very much for the MCAS. They've been for the MCAS for decades because they thought it was going to close the gap, close the achievement gap. And so the problem is that the people who are concerned are the ones who are not going to pass the MCAS. That's what we know. That's just one thing. We don't want kids who are not going to do well, and I see what your point, do well on the MCAS to not get their diploma. We have to trust the teachers who are doing stuff, like a Minuteman, making sure that the coursework, my son is in plumbing, all the coursework, they're actually going to get those skills, but they work very tightly with industry in the vocation to make sure that they're passing electricians and carpenters. There's always going to be funny things going on, but that you have to trust those teachers. They have the most, they care about the kids. So it's fine that at the top everything looks good. We're talking about the kids who don't pass. And we're talking about the kids who are going to have trouble just because they don't take tests well and so forth, and just they kind of get chewed up, having to go back and forth, having to do this a number of times. And I've got some anecdotes. I mean, I appreciate you talking about that, like the larger picture, 99% are going to get through. But we want to think about what are you doing to that lower part. That's one point. That's why I think the MTA and its teachers groups have a lot of different things they want to change about the 1993 law. This was one they just wanted to draw a line under, or draw a line through. Let's just get rid of the high school graduation requirement and just take that away, because the MCAS is important to see, this is what because your son's story sounds a lot like mine. My son was not a good reader for years, and they moved him along and so forth. He was Mr. Social, was fine, and then his reading really started to go. He had his last evaluation, his reading was average. He was always struggling with reading because his executive functions, ADHD and so forth. So the intervention, when I say intervention, I mean the actual special instruction that he's getting is really good. Just putting time into that. He was taken out of class a lot of times in elementary school, and it was fun. I think it has to do with how emotionally. My son is very thick-skinned in that way, so it didn't hurt him. But he understands he's got the things he's not good at doing, and he did. I should mention he just took it. He passed the English, and he passed the science and the math. He missed the English by 1 point, so we're almost there, because this is still the law. I mean, as a parent, I need this.
You're the lead signer on the petition, correct?
Yeah, yeah.
What percentage? I also heard at the beginning that the Massachusetts Teachers Association is backing this ballot initiative. What percentage of the funds being spent on the Yes On, what question are we on again? 2?
Question 2.
Yes On 2 question is from the Mass Teachers Association or the Federation of Teachers, the other big teachers union, and what percentage is coming from private citizens?
Can you answer any of that?
I don't have that information, but I'll tell you, the bulk of the money's coming from the Mass Teachers Association.
But
I
it's not-
can't give you a specific number about
But
it.
it's not just money. I mean, this money is important to make the paper to get things out. But when we're collecting signatures, we're talking to the people, and because the anecdotes start to turn into statistics, because you're starting to get numbers. And a lot of people are very much set on, let's just get rid of this high school graduation. We understand every single, especially your point. Your point is a very good point. You want to make sure these kids are being taught what they need to be taught. And I think the teachers are saying, we can do a better job, and we weren't spending so much time with the MCAS. The MCAS, it's such a big machinery. You take the test in the spring, you don't find anything out so many months later. I'd like to see them tested in the beginning of the year, something in the middle, something shorter, so you see, are you actually making progress?
Shelley, I heard Elaine say that it takes 6 half days to take the test. That's, let's say, 3 days.
No, I think it's more than that, but they
Well,
lost
you
6
said
half days.
6 half days.
They lost 6 half days. In other words, the kids who were taking the test were in school, but the other kids didn't go to school because so many people were proctoring kids who were taking the test. Do you understand what I mean?
Not really,
Like if
but
your
let me
teacher
go
is
beyond
proctoring
where my
some other
question
kid
goes
and
to.
you don't.
A large number, the children who passed got to stay home for half a
Yes.
day, and the children who didn't
6
pass
months.
had to
That's
go
what
to
he told
school
me,
for half a day
Okay.
and take the test again.
Last year.
Let's say you were right, that it takes 6 half days, 3 days for the first. But Shelley is saying, well, my question is, what % of the time that a teacher teaches on 270 days school year?
990.
180.
Yeah, it's
180.
Lexington's 185.
180 days. Of the 180 days that the students are in class, in front of a teacher, behind a teacher, with a teacher, how much of their time, the teacher's time, is spent teaching to the MCAS?
Well, I think sophomore year at Minuteman, I don't know, 60% or more. I mean, they want to make sure that these kids, every English exam, every English assignment, every math assignment looks like the MCAS. Every science looks like the MCAS. I see what my son is learning. And
So how does that differ from, you mentioned algebra earlier, how, if they're teaching algebra and now they're going to teach to the MCAS standards of passing the algebra as part of the mathematics test, are we really teaching differently?
Well, it is different because it's multiple choice. For example, they always have that one distractor answer that's, they find like the mistake that everyone makes in algebra, and they'll try to trip the kid up. And what they teach them is how to catch that particular thing.
Well, that's feedback. That's meaning the teacher needs to teach that portion of the algebra, portion of math better.
Yeah.
It's
So
I guess I'm just listening to the professional teachers, and they're saying that, we could be doing a much better job of giving the kids the content and assessing them. That's what the MCAS assessment still stays there, without penalizing those who don't, by taking away their diploma.
I have a question. Is the MCAS, I mean, in all reality, is it testing the students or is it testing the academic system?
That's a good question.
I think
That's what
it's the
was reading
second. I think it's more of the
It's the system, but hold on a second. Did you want to jump in? Because I thought you wanted to say
No,
something. No? You sure? Okay.
And
Don't
so,
feel out- no.
and so, but I mean, I started life off as an auto mechanic, and I never attacked my test machine that I was using. Okay, the test was the test.
Because it gave you good information.
It gave you information. Now, granted, there were times where my tester itself was questionable. There were things about it that made me doubt its veracity. So then I would get another tester to correlate. But the point is that if the MCAS is really testing the academic structure in the system, what then is the next step? Because when you show me a platform, I look at that as, okay, if you are in range, then I guess a platform is good. But what should the numbers be? Again, like when I'm testing the compression on an engine, I'm looking for a range of numbers, and as long as they're within that percentage, the engine is good. Okay? And so how does the MCAS test get used, or is this all smoke and mirrors? That's kind of...
It's not all smoke and mirrors. It's not all smoke and mirrors. Okay, so do you mind if I jump in?
Oh, please, you're the...
All right, so I'm a teacher, and Paul, before I go on, I have a question. Why does it matter who's putting the money towards it? I'm just curious.
As someone who has followed the Massachusetts Teachers Association for the last 30 years, They have opposed pretty much any type of educational reform in the Commonwealth and around the country. And I say that as someone whose sister is a member of the Mass Teachers Association, and actually she was for 25 years. She moved to Rhode Island, now teaches in Rhode Island. I say that as someone who both college roommates at UMass, go Minutemen, are members of teachers unions. It's just that, and I will say, I'm at a Republican town committee meeting. I know we had a little rally with a Democrat, but we still haven't. And as someone who has gotten literally the same exact postcard with picture of Democratic state rep candidate, Democratic state senate candidate, and Democratic state congressional candidate sent to my house because my sister was in a union. They didn't even care who the Republicans were. They didn't send them questionnaires. They didn't send. So I'm wary when we had the ballot question on school choice a few years ago that was pushed heavily by Governor Baker. The Mass Teachers Association mortgaged their headquarters, their skyscraper in Boston to oppose that. And so I'm a little wary when I hear a teachers union. Listen, if I'm in a union, I don't want them to have me working harder for less money. I want to work less for more money. That's why I pay union dues. And I'm not blaming teachers for saying we want to teach. We didn't go into teaching to teach a test. We went to teaching to inspire children. I don't blame them for saying we don't like the fact that we have this teaching exam. But in Marlborough, where I am from, and my colleague here, Bob, I was the only elected official in Marlborough who supported a charter school. And that charter school, that literally, one of my best friends now almost punched me in the face outside of a polling place has been ranked the number 1, number 2, and number 3 high school in this state. And a bunch of Russian immigrants came here and started it in Marlborough. And Marlborough High School that I graduated from is not ranked number 1 in the state, number 2, or number 3. And the only way I know that is because there's testing standards to compare, Minuteman versus Assabet Valley versus Hudson High School versus, Amherst High.
Okay, so that gives me some perspective. So, all right, so...
I'm wary. Wary.
A little hostile, I think, maybe, but that's okay, That's just right. It's all good. So, here's the thing. I came to teaching in my 40s, okay? I grew up in Chelsea. I live in Burlington. Does everybody know where Chelsea is? Right?
Yeah, I know where Burlington is.
And I live in Burlington now, and I teach in Lexington. So I've been, I've had experience across the socioeconomic spectrum. Now, here's the thing. I'm not actually opposed to standardized testing. Okay?
Not opposed to standardized.
I am not opposed to standardized testing. I think there's some value to it. Okay? I took it when I was a mailman. Okay? And I did very well. I took it when I went into the military, and I did very, very well. Okay? So standardized tests have been beneficial to me. Okay, personally. Okay? I don't necessarily think we should get rid of MCAS. I have some problems with the way they administer it now, because when my kids were younger, I have a 27-year-old and a 30-year-old. They took it in 4th grade, I think it was 7th grade, and 10th grade. Okay? So I think there's a need for benchmarks. Okay? But I do not think it's the be-all to end-all. Okay? And so we're not looking to get rid of the MCAS itself. Okay? Right now it's administered 3rd grade through 8th grade, and then again 10th grade. Okay? It's, to me, personally, I believe it's a bit of a money grab by Pearson, the way it's administered. The publisher, I believe it's a bit of a money grab right now, okay? And I don't think it's necessary to do as often as we do. That's my personal opinion, okay? But we're not saying get rid of any of that, okay? All we're saying is get rid of the graduation requirement. And it's not even getting rid of the graduation requirement, it's replacing the graduation requirement. And here's why I'm on board with that, okay? There's a few reasons. One, yeah, there's about 1% of the student population, okay, that does not get their high school diploma because of that, okay? Small number, but it's still a number, okay? Private school students, religious school students, and homeschool students do not have to take it, okay? So if we're really going to measure something, we really should be measuring everything in the state. So I think that's inequity there. I think zip code matters, okay? And that's why I brought up Chelsea, Burlington, and Lexington. Okay, I can tell you without a test why kids in Chelsea don't do as well as kids in Lexington, and I realize the world isn't fair, and I realize life isn't fair, okay? Chelsea was not a great school system, okay? But I came out of it, I did pretty well. I've done a lot of different things. I've been a lobster fisherman, I've actually been a mailman for a number of years, okay? I was a bouncer, okay? I've worked for corporations, banks, okay? I've been an analyst, I've mentioned departments of analysts. One of the ways I used to hire analysts is, and this was premeditated, I would be interviewing, and out of the blue, I would walk to the whiteboard, I'd write an algebraic equation on the board, and I'd actually have them try and do it. Even if they got the answer wrong, it was how they approached it, how they reasoned things out, and I would hire based on that, okay? Now, I didn't always hire people that had bachelor's degrees or master's degrees. Sometimes I hire somebody with an associate's degree because they had the right skill set, okay? And sometimes that works out, not always. Of my 2 kids, my oldest boy, Jonathan, got the John and Abigail Adams Scholarship because he got a perfect score.
Multiple.
My younger son, Jake, okay, who's on an ed plan, okay, ADHD, okay, attentional difficulties, and an actual memory issue. He's a bright kid, but you ask him to do his multiplication tables, he still can't do it, okay? But, okay, he got his associates, he's working on his bachelor's, okay, still trying to figure out what he wants to do. Waits tables a couple nights a week, okay, and he brings home about 800 to 1,200 a week. He's hustling. And I'm trying to convince him, okay, maybe college isn't for you. Okay, maybe you want to go invest, maybe you want to go buy some property or something like that. But he never passed MCAS. He would never would have his, had his diploma, right? And he ended up getting a couple scholarships and everything when he went to college, all right? So I've had some experience with this. And as a matter of fact, Jake, when he was in 4th grade, didn't show up on the bus one day, okay? And all of a sudden we're like, where is he? Well, the administrator, the principal of the school, kept all the kids that didn't finish MCAS after school and didn't tell the parents, okay? So there's stuff like this that happens. Okay, I've sat in meetings where people talk about the subgroups, okay? Students of color, okay? We met kids from Boston and Lexington, okay? Not English language learners, okay? And they perform at a lower level, okay? When you talk about doing, let's do some sort of modification or some sort of intervention to help these kids, well, we can't do that because that's discriminatory, okay? We gotta do something to raise up all kids. Well, that's just stupid. Okay, because if you have these groups that are not doing well and everybody else is doing well, why wouldn't you focus on it? So there's a lot of inconsistencies here. And every state in the union has a test, okay? Because if they take federal funds, they have to have a test. There's only 7 that tie it to a graduation requirement. So Massachusetts is in the company of New Jersey. I think it's Virginia, it could be West Virginia, but I think it's Virginia. Florida, okay, Texas, Louisiana. We're not in good company there. Okay, so what really is the value of tying a test to a graduation requirement? So all I'm saying is, I'm okay with standardized tests, okay? I can usually figure out the patterns, I do very well on, okay? I just don't think this is appropriate, okay, as a graduation requirement. Keep the test, keep the data, keep looking at the districts, trying to raise, make modifications, adaptations, and try and raise everybody up, okay? Or raise the people up that need it, okay? I don't think it should be a graduation requirement. That's my story.
Are parochial, private, and homeschool students, are they funded with tax dollars?
Some are.
No, they're not. The anti-aid amendment passed in the 1850s doesn't allow it.
Go ahead.
I was in parochial school, and my father had to fill out a form with the federal government, and the money that would go to East Boston school system went to the Lady of Mount Carmel school system to pay for my education. So yes, they do get some federal funds.
The anti-aid amendment to the Massachusetts Constitution passed in the 1850s by the Know-Nothings was specifically passed to stop public funds from going to parochial schools. I don't know what the specific situation with what happened with you in the 1950s, but I can tell you that the state of Massachusetts told the city of Marlborough that we couldn't spend any money on that.
Can I ask you a question?
And so my point is that...
Spend any money on what?
What's that?
Spend any money on what?
We were giving grants to local nonprofit charities like the Food Pantry and the Alternative Market and the Addiction Referral Center.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
The money you're talking about, is that state funds or federal funds?
State.
The money I got for the school was from the federal government.
Right. Okay. Federal.
So back to my question, are parochial schools, private schools, or homeschool children given state tax dollars? No, they're not. So why is the MCAS, why are they not tested? Because tax dollars fund the public schools. And we need accountability in some way to judge it. I know AMSA is number one because it was the topic of discussion in Marlboro last week, because Marlboro High School was 267th. And I would not know that if they did not release the rankings of all the 400 schools. And I don't want to be a math nerd about this, but it was 700 out of almost 1 million. That's not 1%. That's less than 1/10 of 1%. And so if, I kind of feel like this is this is an attempt.
Right.
This is an attempt to try to lower the standards.
Okay, wait,
Yeah,
I want to hear,
so-
I missed what you
Yeah,
guys
let's
said.
This is
just
a minor
clarify.
point.
Yeah,
It's a
it's a
minor
minor
point.
point, but let's clarify. So I gave you the number of all the students in the Commonwealth. What the 1% says is of the number of graduating high schoolers for that year, which is lower, which do you know?
It's
it?
So what would that number be?
About 70,000.
Okay, well that's
So-
a different number.
So yes, exactly. So
Then
that's
I
just who
retract.
doesn't.
I retract my earlier
Yeah,
comment.
who doesn't pass, it's about 700 of about 70,000 graduate, just the seniors for that year.
Now, I have a question. Okay, so you don't want this to be attached to graduation. Okay, I get that. But if a kid doesn't pass, say, the MCAS, is it something that, well, he didn't pass, so what, he graduates? Do they actually spend some time trying to get the kid to pass what he didn't get on that,
Well-
even though it's not attached to
That's the point of
graduation? That's
intervention.
the thing that would bother me.
That needs, that's the point of intervention. This child has a reading problem, this child has a problem with understanding questions and so forth. And then you go back and you work on that particular thing. I think another problem with and this is what I mean about taking the SATs, there's something about the way that these tests are designed that doesn't really mimic how you use language or anything in the real world. I encourage you, regardless of one yes or no on two, is to go back and look online at some of the past tests, some of the past questions, and you'll see, especially in the reading, because reading I think is the most natural thing. It's language. You read your newspaper, you read your sports, but you understand this is them trying to get this information. If you actually look at some of the questions on the English, and I was good, I did well on the, I did well on the SATs and so forth. If you look at the question, there's one thing they do. They have a child read two paragraphs about the same subject, and they ask questions to have the kind of contrast. And the questions they ask have nothing to do with what an average person would ever come away with that. It's just, it's kind of like, when you do a crossword puzzle, you're in a special group because there are lots of little clues and things are very kind of opaque. And so, but when you're a kid who's just trying to read and you read, oh, this is really interesting, you read this, and then they ask this question, you're like, the Whiskey Tango Foxtrot. I don't understand, and this, it's not natural. And I think for kids who aren't into that sort of, that sophistication, because I think if you're going to write something to pass on information, it needs to be clear. Clarity is important. And I think, it's something things, with English, with my son, like in fiction, you've got settings, you've got metaphors, and all that kind of stuff. That's fine if you're really into that. But for a kid who's just reading manuals to understand how to do something, it doesn't come naturally. And I think that's where kids get tripped, because it's an artifice, really, to contrast and compare two articles. I mean, you're going to think about, this told me this told me that, but you're not, and I just think there's a kind of a bias to that a little bit. And I think it comes out for kids who would say, oh yeah, I understood this, I understood that, and this is what I can tell you.
See, I was flight crew in the Air Force for 21 years. And
Speak up.
We had a logbook on the airplane for maintenance logs. And you had to be able to indicate what the problem was with the airplane. You had to know how serious it was. It was either a red circle, which means needs to be fixed before flight. A red X would mean the plane was grounded until this was repaired. And so in order to communicate, some of the kids that were coming in did not have the math skills or the communication skills to do the job. I remember listening to, I think it was Hannity on Fox News, and he was talking about the school system in Baltimore. There was one school where none of the children passed MCAS. Okay? When we used to fly, if somebody made a mistake, it could cost the whole crew their life. So I believe we need a standard, and if the MCAS test is this bad as you say it is, it ought to be adjusted to do it. But I still think minimum requirements on the MCAS test need to be achieved to get the diploma.
Can I just?
Jill, yeah.
Yeah, just to tie on into that, one of the reasons that I'm no on question 2 is that I do, so for my son who has dyslexia and ADHD, I do feel, so if to pass and get his diploma, he were expected to be in the exceeding grade level expectations category, I would have concerns about asking him to do that. It's not the way he naturally learns. He doesn't. He has to be just over failing. He has to be in the middle of the partially meeting grade level expectations range, which for him will be a reach, but is also attainable. And so I feel like that is a fair thing to ask of him. He has to get, in some tests, like between 25 and 35% of the questions right. So that feels like he should be able to do that. He would say, I feel able to do that. We'll see when he takes the MCAS test. But I guess one of the other things that worries me about, so the MCAS is staying, but I'm speaking as a mom here, if that no longer counts, so I have a kid who does not like school, and if I tell him that the test no longer makes a difference for him in terms of like consequences for what's going to happen to him, he'll often say about schoolwork, Mom, why do I have to do this worksheet? You have to make me care. The graduation requirement makes him care, it makes the adults around him care, and it sets this standard that he knows he has to clear, and it makes him attend to doing that level of work and getting it done. So.
Am I thinking incorrectly? But it would seem to me that the schools ought to come up with the funding for these parochials and private schools and homeschoolers to be tested, and they should be tested separately, and you can see, well, are these homeschoolers doing better on the MCAS? And then if so, how come? What's going on here that these private schoolers and these homeschoolers, or are they doing the same? And again, it would give you a comparison of one system with the other. Am I missing?
They do that now. I mean, that's a good idea.
Well, they don't. But they don't.
They don't have to.
No, but I'm just saying. I'm saying that on public schools, you can see where Lexington.
No, but what he's saying is, right, compare
We
apples
have
to apples across the board.
I have a view. I mean, I'm going to tell. We're always honest here. I have a view that a public education isn't worth much, because there's a lot of things that involved. And that's why I see parents would prefer to send their kids to private school. I am aware of many public school teachers who send their kids to private school. I mean, and even that tells me that even they know that, it just ain't right. And so to me, if they had the testing for everybody, and we could see, well, what's the education like for these kids, and what's the education, then we could say, well, what's up with these education systems? Because again, the problem is not the test, the problem is not the student, the problem is the education. Am I wrong?
But the test just sucks a lot of resources and time and emotion. And
No, but I actually understand what Chuck's saying.
Yeah.
And so the thing is, for me personally, I still don't think us being in the company of Florida, Texas, and so on.
That's irrelevant, though.
New
I'm
York.
sorry, it's irrelevant. We're not.
Say-
I don't care what Texas and Florida do.
Right,
We're
yeah.
Massachusetts. In Massachusetts, we care about education.
So,
we're
Paul, let
we're
me tell you
known
why-
for having
Paul,
education.
Let me tell you why you should care, Paul, okay? Because if the test is so important, right, look at Texas's school systems, okay? Look at Louisiana. They're not doing great, okay? So, what is the value of having a test tied to a graduation requirement?
Yeah, but did they have a comprehensive Educational Reform Act in the early 1990s? We're the home of Harvard, not Texas Tech. We're the home of MIT, not West Virginia Tech. We're the home of famous educational institutions. I had, friends at UMass who were not from the United States, who went to the University of Massachusetts because when they went back to Greece and Saudi Arabia and elsewhere in Korea, people heard they went to a university in Massachusetts. we were known for education. They literally thought
Still
like
be known for
the
education.
the value of the degree was more, even though the value of the degree of a UMass degree in the 1990s isn't worth what it is now. So there is a difference, and I agree. The parochial schools and the home schools and the private schools, they should have to take the MCAT exam, so we can do a compare and contrast.
But just to be clear on my point, okay? If the test makes such a difference, right? And we're not Texas and we're not Louisiana, but their school systems aren't great, okay? But yet they have a graduation requirement tied to a test, and it is because they take federal funds, okay? So what's the point? I'm listening.
Hold on, what is this? Oh, this is the after ballot. I'm a federalist. I let the 50 states are the laboratories of democracy. What they decide to do for their educational standards is not what we're going to decide to do for our educational standards. What New Hampshire is this weirdo state that has no state income tax, no sales tax, and in Massachusetts we have a sales tax and we have an income tax and we have a capital gains tax to fund education, and New Hampshire doesn't. I mean, I literally had a friend who complained out loud that she hated the fact that people from Massachusetts were moving to New Hampshire because they wanted things like paved roads and streetlights. And because, her standard was, I want lower taxes, I don't care about services. And in Massachusetts, we do care about services. We care about the educational standards. I have been lectured to by many a colleague that the people move to get to the better school systems. I know people who have moved to Marlboro. I've met the city of Marlboro multiple times, and the number of people who said, oh yeah, I moved here because of the Advanced Math and Science Academy, being in the city of Marlboro gives me a higher chance of getting in. My sister, a public school teacher, sends her child to a Catholic school. Okay, my friend, my Masonic Lodge gives out the annual Marlboro Teacher of the Year to award and recognize excellence in the Marlboro public school systems. And of all the winners, the last 10 winners, 5 of them sent their kids to private schools. And I sit there and go, like,
well, that kind
what
of
is going on
kind of
here?
argues what I was saying. So
what is going on
we
here?
gotta kind of wrap
Can I
up.
make
So
one? I don't know if
Yep.
this will sway anyone or not. It's probably a small policy point, but there is another way that it relates to this issue of we're an outlier. So we made, when we did the Ed Reform Act, we said we are not going to have uniform graduation course requirements across the state. Instead, we're going to use the 10th grade MCAS to make sure that our students are reaching a certain basic minimum level of education. We are one of 2 states that decided that. Vermont is the other one. So us in Vermont, there is no statewide graduation standard for our 2 states. If you go to any other state, they will say you have to take 4 years of math, 4 years of English, 3 years of science, 3 years of social. We say we recommend it, and that if you do that, it aligns with the UMass admissions requirements and state universities admissions requirements. However, the state says we're not mandating that. So there's a group that I'm part of that just did an analysis, and currently half of the high schools in the state do not adhere to those course requirements. Half, and then another half either do or go beyond those. But currently we don't have a statewide diploma
so how do we
requirement.
compare?
Well, so we do have state standards though,
We
which
have
is part of
standards,
the same law.
and you hope
right?
that,
Which
yes,
were created as part of that law.
that's correct. But the only way we know if people,
Make sure your book
this
is
is fundamentally what we know on this, is
Taking them out.
the only way we know that is by checking to see if we have.
Well, so there is this proposal to require 4 years of English for you write the Mass Core.
Yes.
A lot of the people who are
But
supporting.
it's not there yet.
No, it's not there yet,
Yeah.
but for example, the Senate Chair of the Education Committee announced that he was going to vote for question 2, and in the same statement said, I'm also filing a bill to require that all kids have to have 4 years of English and 4 years of math, and I think it's 2 years of a lab science, and I don't
It's
remember.
3 years of a lab science.
3 years of lab
Yeah,
science.
to be in a
The Mass Core
requirements.
proposal,
2 years of a
which
little
right
bit.
now 86% of kids do have those, but.
But that data isn't reliable because it's self-reported data.
Oh, okay, so you may be right about that, then I
Yeah,
don't
it's
know.
that, the only data, because the state doesn't collect it because it's recommended, not required.
Yeah,
So the only way we know who requires what
which
is
high
this
schools
analysis.
require.
Which high schools require this analysis.
no argument, I mean,
It's
I
a-
think we
yeah,
should have
it's
that.
have to and have to.
But,
See, I love this, because this is collaboration. That's,
We
you know.
agree on a lot.
I know we do.
yeah, but the beautiful thing is, right, in this country, we can agree to disagree.
Yeah.
Eat it up.
I've asked,
Eat it to me every day.
one was a former teacher about question two. And both of them said to me, the teachers are still working, they're unsure, they don't know what to do. But one did say to me, they were concerned because of the immigrant students coming into her class. They were taking up more time and it was away from the other students. And I was wondering how that's gonna affect our grades, because you're talking about time teaching the test. What about times teaching English to non-speaking English?
Yeah, that's the point. I mean, there are only so many hours in the day, only so
I know.
much time. And the teacher's thinking, I could spend this time much more valuably if I didn't have to worry about teaching to the test. I mean, the test should be, there should be an assessment. I think the mass core, I mean, I think it's one of the things that MTA is pushing, saying mass core is an excellent idea, because then you really actually have state standards. But there's a nasty bite to this, even though you think it's only quote unquote 1%. That's what comes out of the grinder. There's a lot more. There's a lot more time that's being spent just getting kids to pass it, as opposed to getting kids to, to be ready to be employed.
I got a quick question, I promise to be quiet, but I won't be.
I'm never quiet.
If somebody was to, well, let me put it this way. What is your opinion with regarding kids taking SATs in order to qualify, and get a grade on SATs in order to qualify for admission into a college?
I think it's important because MIT, which is why they learned that. This is why it's different for the top versus the bottom academically. They learned that when they kind of dropped the SATs, they were getting students who weren't ready.
So
that's very important. That they do tell
But it's
important things, but it's different from stopping a child, a young person, from having a diploma to go out to the working world and to catch up whatever they need to do.
So, let me ask again, is it my understanding probably would be that the four of you opinion that kids shouldn't have to have a 1,500 or whatever on an SAT?
No, I think it's a good indication if you're going to see it. My son is not college bound. He's vocational, and you're talking about he's very, very good at what you're talking about. He can't, he's not a good reader and so forth, but he can put things together. He can follow the instructions. He can do that.
Yeah.
So the MCAS is, I mean, he's going to pass it. He almost did. He got two hardest ones done. He got one more to do. So it can happen if you teach to the test.
No,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
my question
Two
is,
things.
if
Herman,
you're
I wanna
an
say something.
admissions person at
I would use the SATs. Absolutely.
Yes.
Harvard, Yale,
Yeah.
MIT,
We agree with you.
Yes.
We agree with you.
they should,
Yes.
SATs are a good measure?
Yes,
as to
but
whether somebody should be at
there's a difference
academic?
between graduating from high school and going into college. Okay, some people, college isn't for everyone, okay? It's not, okay? And so the thing is, you need some sort of benchmark to say you're ready for college. So we agree that
SATs are good.
Yeah. All right.
So
Thank you.
SATs
Well,
are
I'm not sure if
okay.
you agree, but.
I'm not sure, I'm not
Okay.
familiar.
Who can show
I've
me in
read
the
contradictory
Constitution
things.
where the Constitution allows for public education? Where is it in the US Constitution that public education
It's in the
exists?
state, it's in Massachusetts.
Where is it in the state constitution?
And the language one.
There is
We
a
have
I
it.
clause.
think the government's the problem. You guys are getting way down in the weeds. The problem is the government is in charge of education. The problem is the government.
And
Well, that's why when I was knocking on doors all summer. Wait a second. Now, while I was knocking
We
on
shouldn't
doors
have
all
public
summer.
education at all. I don't
Well-
think we should spend a penny on public education.
Well,
that's a
but-
whole nother can
that's a
of
different
worms.
argument. But the thing is, while I was knocking on doors all summer,
This isn't the libertarians meeting, Jim.
whether it's Republican, Independent, or Democrat, if you talk to somebody, about 75% of them were saying yes on two, because, and for different reasons sometimes, and some people were using the same argument you just made. So,
They hold a gun to your head.
All right, everybody, it's time to wrap it up.